I gave people all the stuff they really needed. Social Security checks, utility bills, TV guide.
I want a TV guidance counselor. TV guidance counselor. Staying up to watch all night, and everything's gonna be alright with my TV guidance counselor.
Hello, welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. It's Ken Reed here, your TV Guidance Counselor, and this is the show where each and every week I discuss classic television with a fantastic guest. I was going to say fascinating, and then I lost the plot there. Fascinating and fantastic guest, usually using a back issue of TV Guide magazine from my personal collection as the inspiration for our conversation. This week, it is not needed, as this man is television incarnate. My guest this week is Joel Thurm. Joel I don't even know where to start. He's a casting guy. He's got a great book out called Sex, Drugs, and Pilot Season, Confessions of a Casting Director. He cast Grease and Rocky Horror, and worked on Golden Girls and Miami Vice and Love Boat and Taxi and Cheers and The Airplane, insane. The book has great stories in it. He tells a bunch of great stories here. If you like the show and you have not read the book, buy it. It is on Amazon. It is very, very fun. Pardon my throat clearing. Allergies are still bothering me. And congratulations, you've made it through almost 6 months of 2025, as have I. And it's my birthday week. So I can say, hey, if you go over to the Patreon, patreon.com/TV Guidance Counselor, and give $5 or more a month, you would not get a PDF this week because there's no TV guide that we're looking at, but you would still have access to all the previous TV guide PDFs, and you'll get one next week. Next week, we're back to the TV guide format, everybody. So, it's my birthday week. If you want to throw me a little cash, because life is tough. I won't get into it. Let me know how you're doing. If you want to hear my complaints, you can email me at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com. And I'm officially old this week, and I don't know how that happened. Anyway, this is a great episode. Amazing stories. If you like old showbiz, which I presume you do if you're still listening, you will enjoy this episode. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Joel Thurm.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite from the West Coast. Joel, how are you, sir?
How am I? Well, I've only had my first cup of coffee, so I'm a little. I need a second one, but I'll soldier through this.
I appreciate you doing that for me. Only half caffeinated. I'm very happy to have you on the show. The book is great. Anyone who listens to the show will love the book.
Thank you.
It's sort of like 4 books in one, I would say. They're sort of the headline grabber, sort of, you get your salacious kind of tell-all in there that people like in a Hollywood book. But there's also sort of a very practical, almost instructional, what does a casting director do in there, which is very, very interesting. And the whole last third of the book was this amazing sort of index of every single pilot that you worked on in a 30-year period, and you're like a little capsule.
Well, wait, let me stop you. Yeah, but I understand what you're saying. By the way, I agree with you. I think that's the best part when you read all those things. But it wasn't 30, whatever it was, 30. It's 10 years.
Okay.
I was at NBC from 80 to 90, roughly. So those are all the ones from there. But I'm glad that you're the first person to mention that part. And I realized maybe I should, if I ever redo this book again, put that in the front so that people read it.
Well, it's rewarding though in the back because you get sort of your experiences and how you got there. So getting your personality through reading the previous 300 pages, that last half is like a little dessert. It's like
I love you. You're so right.
And it feels like 30 years because there's so many shows NBC, and for people listening to the show, they know, but the Tartikoff sort of era of NBC, which is kind of where the bulk of your work there was, if I'm remembering.
Well, yeah, because he came in, it started with Fred Silverman, with Fred Silverman when I was there. But Fred Silverman had been my boss at like 3 other places.
Right.
So I knew him and we were fine. I had no problem. And afterwards, we actually became partners, by the way, Fred and I, in developing shows. Fred actually completed his trifecta when he was fired from NBC, but he did just fine after that, because finally he made money by producing those 2 old people shows. But and I love Fred really so, and I'm sorry he's no longer with us, and he was very good to me.
And he was one of the titans of sort of television. Like, it's like Tartikoff, Fred Silverman, Grant Tinker, like all these people you've worked with.
Well, Grant, I have a few unkind things to say about, but
a lot
that's
of people
another story. No one else has ever said anything bad about Grant. When you said other people have, who?
I've gotten some on the show. I've done over 700 episodes, so there's been some stories.
Did anyone say he was homophobic?
Yes, I have heard that.
Well, I'm adding to that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, speaking of so many people who are friends and who I've had on the show, you mentioned in the book, like Cassandra Peterson, you were a producer on Mistress
Elvira.
of the Dark, which because Brendon produced it as a film as well.
I'll tell you what happened. Brendon said, in order to induce Brendon to stay at NBC, past his contract, NBC or the corporate, whatever, who was RCA or it was GE at this point, said, okay, if you stay, we'll finance some, motion pictures for you. Not for television, but feature films. And that made him stay. So Brendon calls me into his office one day, and he knew I was friends with Cassandra. So he said to me, do you think your friend Elvira would be interested in a movie? I said, are you kidding? She's in makeup and circling the building. Of course she'd be interested. And that's how it happened. And Cassandra happened to have a script already written by her and John Paragon. And it was a pretty good script, if I do say so myself.
I love it. I think, you say sort of the movie didn't come out as well as it could have, I think, because of tinkering, right?
Well, I can tell you what happened. First of all, it should never have been released where it was. People dump movies on Labor Day weekend. Brendon, out of extreme loyalty to a guy named, I forgot his name, but he was the former head of movies at NBC who had moved over to New World Production. So I said, sure. And I called Cassandra and said, of course. She sent me the script. I read it. She had suggested Penelope Spheris to direct it.
Had her on the show, another friend of the show.
It's my fault that I should have tried harder to convince Brendon to let her do it. Instead, we wound up with Jim, what the fuck his name is, who was okay. He was not terrible, but he disrespected Cassandra. It's her fucking character.
She's
Who
the
knows
reason
more
we're
about
seeing
her
it.
character than her?
Yeah.
And I blame myself for not defending her more when the battles came.
It's a different time, though, as well. Like, and Penelope, who's amazing and a great director, she was sort of unproven, though, for it's a relatively mainstream film. She
was totally unproven until the 2 guys, until whatever
Garth,
it was called.
Yeah. She had just done Dudes, I think, in '87, which was as close as
anyway, it was I should have listened to Cassandra more. Slap me, I'm bad.
It's still
but the
good.
movie still turned out good.
It's great. It's very funny.
The movie has about, I think, a 70% laugh. 75% of the jokes work.
Yeah, which is pretty good.
I still look at it and I say it's pretty good. So.
Speaking of jokes, I would say it's fair to say your sort of affinity was for sort of casting comedy, or did you kind of just fall into that? But
that's what I got typed into it.
But it's difficult to be able to see the potential or comedy timing in people, because you say in the book too, there are some people who don't audition well, but you're still like, no, this is the person.
Well, I'm supposed to know that. I mean, that's why I was a good I wasn't a good casting director. I was a very, very, very good casting director, as all my recent press will associate with. No, seriously.
Yeah, no, you have a track record that's pretty inarguable.
Yeah, but what was it that we were talking about? But what were we just talking about that I raised? By the way, I'm 82 and a half, and so I now forget things in
quite
an
all
instant.
Right. It's that you kind of got typecast as a casting director for comedy.
Yeah, but what people forget is I also won an Emmy for Inherit the Wind,
right,
which I put together with, it was supposed to be Kirk Douglas and Gregory Peck. and Gregory Peck pulled out, and it was being produced and put together by one of Kirk's sons, Peter. And I put that together, and it won an Emmy. So, I mean, that's drama.
Yeah,
That's
and
drama.
it's
That's
definitely not a comedy.
comedy.
What is that? One of the things you're most proud of? Is there like a something you produced or worked on that you feel like not enough people saw that you're like most proud of?
Oh, God, there's so many. Well, first of all, I had to learn. All right, I started out in television like at the Tiffany level. I was only doing like really great, except for Bob Newhart, which is a whole other thing, and the comedy. But I was associated with only very high quality projects at CBS. I did all of the Bicentennial Minutes. Do you remember them?
Oh yeah.
But do you know that I also worked with every actor individually to rewrite the scripts for them?
Which is why they're so good.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it was, and I had my best experience was, and I think this is in the book, with Charlton Heston.
I don't know this story. No.
Well, like I said, so I was doing the Bicentennial Minutes, and this was during the, what do you call it, when there was like a gasoline shortage. And
oh yeah.
Had a lineup. Okay. Anyway, so Heston comes in, and I meet him at the artist's entrance. And I say, hello, Mr. Blah, blah, blah. He throws his keys to me. Can you do me a favor? I'm almost out of gas. Can you do that? And I said, well, the office is up there. He went away to stay, and I get to take his car to a gas station. It's an old, filthy Corvette inside. And I'm not the greatest shift driver. So if I fucked up his gears, it's his fault.
You'd get in the car and be like, my gears.
But I went and I got him his gas. And then we went to the studio. And he thought that I was like an apprentice or something. He didn't know that I was going to be the guy to direct his minute. And he was so funny when he apologized. But he was very, very sweet. Unlike, so if he's whatever he is, he was very nice to me.
I mean, I've heard that though. Like I have friends who, are huge Charlton Heston fans and Planet of the Apes fans, or what the leftiest of lefty people. Yeah. But he was very professional and nice to them, and didn't sort of bring it with him.
That's all that counts. If they're nice to me and they're professional, I don't expect any more than that.
So let's rewind a little bit, because the other sort of part of the story that was really fascinating to me was sort of how this kid who grows up in Brooklyn, I believe.
East New York in Brooklyn.
Yes. It goes to start working at, these prestige, the networks in the 70s, in the height of the sort of network studio stuff on these huge projects. Like, that's a journey that shouldn't make sense, but it does.
Well, it does, because my whole journey was to get out of Brooklyn. I mean, I didn't have a horrible childhood and all that. I had a wonderful childhood in the sense that, I don't know if you remember reading this or whatever. My grandfather had a dairy farm 2 blocks from our 2-bedroom apartment.
Which shocked me. There was a dairy farm in Brooklyn, but it makes sense.
And my full family was involved in that. My family cornered the kosher milk business in Brooklyn and Queens. Now, I don't know if that's anything to be proud of, but the point is, it was a moneymaker.
Yeah.
No, my grandfather had 56 cows on his farm, and our cousins, the last name of Balsam, if you've ever drank a dairy product in New York, you've probably seen Balsam Farms. That was a cousin. So my family, my family were peasants and farmers in Europe, and that's when they came over here, and that's what they did. So, but I wasn't athletic. But and to be an unathletic kid in Brooklyn, you can imagine, I have no coordination between my eye, a ball, and my hands. I mean, any other sport I'm good in, but not anything that requires those skills.
Yeah.
So, but I had great, what's the word? I forgot the word, but I could take kids to visit my grandfather's farm. So I was like, I made it to the top even without being able to throw or catch a ball.
Cachet. You have cachet. You got status.
I had cachet. That's the word I was looking for. No, it's cachet or status or whatever it was. That gave me my status.
And so you started doing theater, and that sort of led to meeting a lot of sort of larger, big actors or comedy people from sort of a generation slightly before you, who were then moving into TV, right? Is that like how it kind of worked?
I'm not. I have no idea what you just said. I'm trying to figure it out.
So like meeting like Pearl Bailey is like one of
Oh
the
yeah, yeah, but there was no. It was everything was totally random. We're skipping a whole point, but how I got to work for David Merrick. I mean,
right.
first there was summer stock. I mean, literally piece by piece built myself up, but by knowing what I wanted. Anyway, so Pearl, I mean, I don't even know where to start on Pearl because she's so responsible. But we hit it off right the day I started working for David Merrick in a business capacity, not creative. I was in the office all day as Jack Schlissel, who was Merrick's general manager and probably the second most powerful man on Broadway. And Jack was a real hard ass, and I'm not. So it was a very interesting working relationship. And I'm going to cut to the end and come back. Finally one day at the very end, after I'd been at Merrick, I don't know, for about a year, 2 year, year and a half, whatever, he calls me into his office. Get in here. And I was working in a purely business capacity. And he said, look, I can't stand working with you anymore. So you got a choice. You can either go work with Biff Liv, who was in charge of production, which is really what I wanted, not business, reopen our casting director, become our casting director, get a $50 a week raise, or you can walk out.
That's an offer you can't refuse.
That's the first time in Merrick, I realized later on why this all happened, because all around the time this happened, we had a new show, a new straight play that we were going to do. And what happened to the straight play is there were three main characters. So when I discussed with Biff Liv and Merrick who should play these, I said, well, for this one, it should be Pat Hingle, and for this one, it should be Fritz Weaver. What do you think? They both said perfect, literally. And then I said, and we could put in Ken Howard, who was in Promises, who just won, one of ours, because Promises is our show, and he could play the younger. Anyway, the point is, this all happened in about one day with no great effort, and Merrick was shocked that all of this could happen while he had nothing to do with it. That everything happened so fast. Well, all right. So then this play goes on to win the Tony that year, and Ken Howard wins the Tony, and Joe Hardy. So this piece wins 3 Tonys. And Merrick had really nothing to do with it, but he rewarded me because he knew I did. And we remained not friendly, but we re-met many times afterwards. And he was always very, very gracious and wonderful to me.
There's a professional respect there. You get results.
Well, there was.
You're gonna get the respect,
I earned it, and it was fine. I earned it, and I got it.
But you mentioned that too in the book. Like growing up, you like me, you paid attention to who these people were. I think most kids would just watch stuff, but you're kind of making mental notes of the actors and what they do and who would be good in this. Like you're kind of always doing that.
Yes, but it was totally unconscious.
Right.
What it was when the kids are out in the street playing stickball, I was in the house watching television.
Right. Same.
And I think you read in my book about when it came to movies, how my mother encouraged me. Go to the movie theater, see the kids show, then stay for the 2 movies and don't come home till later. Leave me alone.
Perfect babysitter.
And she gave me sandwiches. and enough money for 1 soda, because we really had no money.
It's lost on people, I think, who sort of grew up in the current century, like how important theaters were, because now it's like an amusement park more than like, you would have 6, 7 theaters in a neighborhood, all showing different stuff all day. It was an event. It was a place to be. And it was the way people like binge or watch TV now, you would do at the theater.
Well, we only had 1 movie theater in my neighborhood, the Biltmore, which is like the 6th run, but who cared at that point? And if you wanted to go to a new movie, you went to downtown Brooklyn, with the big theaters, the Paramount, the this, and that. So, I had no problem living in East New York. And I brag about it now, of course.
Is there a movie or TV show that feels like the East New York, Brooklyn that you grew up in?
No, I watched the TV show called East New York.
Yes.
And unfortunately, no, there's nothing like it. And The only thing that was great is that the subway stop that I used to, was my sub, was Van Siclen Avenue. I guess the company repainted that whole place and made it all look good for the TV series, because it didn't look like that when I was a kid.
That is movie magic, the way they do that.
And also as a kid, just to show how I didn't really give a shit about anything. If a train didn't come in, I would just walk down alongside the tracks to the next stop. Not on the subway, only on the elevated ones.
Right.
Because to me, well, I got 3 feet to walk, and the train's not going to hit me.
Yeah, makes
I might
sense.
as well walk to the next stop.
Rather than just stand here and wait, you might as well be doing something.
But I was
right?
that kind of a kid.
Yeah. No, I read, when I was reading your book, I was like, yep. Like for the same stuff when I was growing up, where you're just like, well, I'm not going to not go to the movie. Like, I don't know why that's not a possibility. So you make it out to LA, and then, you know, as we said, you kind of have a track record that's sort of just completely bulletproof, and that, you know, you're casting Grease and Rocky Horror and the TV stuff. You start getting like Fantasy Island's like one of the first ones, and Starsky and Hutch are sort of some of the first ones on TV that you're doing.
Well, what happened is when I was working for CBS, I went for a wonderful woman, and I owe half my career to her and to another woman. Women were very important in my life. Men weren't, and that's a whole other story. I was at CBS for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and then I was kind of forced out of CBS. Now, it was a wonderful forced out. It was perfect. Ethel Wynant, who was my boss, and if you really wanted an interesting project, that woman would make an entire movie. Jewish woman, born in a completely, you know, Christian neighborhood in Northern California, not very attractive woman, but brighter than everybody, would take 2-hour bus rides into San Francisco, which is the nearest city. Basically, she was a completely self-made woman. She single-handedly cast the Mary Tyler Moore Show, one character at a time. When her bosses at CBS, who later became my bosses too, hated the show and didn't want it. I mean, so this is the kind of woman that I worked for, and I learned so much from her. And the other woman is Pearl Bailey. When I was working for David Merrick, my job was literally to be in the office all day, doing as Jack's assistant, typing contracts, negotiating some contracts, whatever. And then I'd have enough time to go to dinner at Joe Allen's, which is just opened, where I could sign checks that made me feel so big. At 21 years old,
yeah,
I could sign a check. And just somehow eventually, Pearl and I hit it off and became friends. When the day I started work, I was taken back to meet her, and we just clicked. I don't know what it was, but I think part of it was she had no family in New York. Her family was on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. She was quite lonely, and for some reason, she liked me, and I liked her. You know, it just worked.
That's all it takes.
And she was the one who whispered in my ear one day that ABC would offer her own show in LA, and did I want to go and work on the show in California? And I said yes. If I had to do it again, I would have said no.
Really?
Well, let me tell you, there was no job. When I got to California, well, first of all, I knew where I was going to live, which is basically on the lovely little street I'm on in Laurel Canyon now, because my best friend had a house with a whole downstairs I could have. Yeah. So, but it just wasn't good. So I show up, and they all think, you know, that I'm part of her posse.
Right. The entourage of Pearl Bailey.
Yeah. And of course not to be trusted, because I'm not on with the production side. I'm with the... It took me about a week, though, to sort of sit down with everybody and make them realize that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And once that happened, it was fine. But also, Pearl and I began to be less and less because she was home with her family here in LA.
Right. Right.
You know, it was different, and we did have a falling out, but it was like, and Pearl, you know, we had a falling out, whatever it was. The next day on my doorstep, there's a ring, a bamboo-shaped ring from Van Cleef and Arpels, which was her way of, you know, And I came into by now the season was over, but she was still going to the office. And I went in and I tried to give her the ring, but I said, look, I don't need this. I said, this is not what I want, Anyway, I don't even know. I guess I had to keep the ring. But here's what happens X number of years later. I don't know how many. But I'm at NBC, and we are doing something the other night, live theater on television. And they had decided they were going to do Member of the Wedding by Carson McCullers. Do you know the plot?
No,
basically.
I don't.
Oh, it's a story of basically the two main characters in the South, a housekeeper and a 12-year-old daughter, a tween daughter. And it's the, typical, and Pearl was the housekeeper. And this girl, who I forgot her name, she wasn't very good. But we were doing it live in Nashville on some whatever. And the show was Member of the Wedding. Member of the Wedding was turned into a movie with Ethel Waters playing the lead. Ethel Waters was Pearl Bailey's idol growing up. So for her to play that part was something extraordinary to be able to do that. So it's at NBC. It's X number of years since I've left Pearl. I've gone on to really big things. Mm-hmm. Now sort of the situation is resolved. She's coming into my office. Well, basically, the producers who were wanted to do this show on NBC came in with all sorts of wonderful actresses' names for the part. And I said, these are all wonderful actresses, but we need a star. I said, no one is going to watch this show unless there's a star playing the part. So Lena Horne don't do maids.
No.
I said, so the next one in line is Pearl Bailey. And, well, we hear she's hard to work with. I said, I worked with her for 2 years on Broadway. She's not hard to work with if you're honest with her. Honesty helps, I said, but if you can come up with someone else, sure. Well, they couldn't. But they still didn't. And they said, well, she can't remember a line. In rehearsal, by the way, she never got through a rehearsal without going up on lines. But, and but this is normal. Because I'm a good casting director, I know that certain actors, including a boyfriend of mine who is an actor, you could watch him in rehearsal and all that, okay. But when he got in front of an audience, something happens. Mm-hmm. And he was terrific. Same thing happened with her. Once in front of the audience, sensation.
There's sort of a theme throughout the book of you being a person who continues to work with people who are difficult to work with. And it turns out really difficult to work with usually means a woman who stood up for herself once or, has an idea of what she wants to do in a thing.
Exactly. And no one listens to her.
Right.
There was an article, I forget, one magazine where Viola Davis was talking about when she would make suggestions, she could see producers' eyes rolling. But I was the opposite. I was the one who said, listen to them. Yeah. When there was a problem with Nell, it happens to be Nell on a show, I said, yeah, the problem is the fucking producer isn't listening to what he said, what his star is saying.
Right. The reason the show's here.
And they got a singer, and yet they're not using that. Anyway, the point is I was never shy.
But you bring up Nell, and Largio Miller's been on the show, and Gimme a Break was a show I loved. It was, you became friends with Nell, and it's.
Can I tell you a story that's not in the book?
Yeah, please do.
Do you know how Gimme a Break happened?
Just from what you had in the book.
Well, I forgot if I put this in the book. I know so many things I couldn't put in the book. It was like.
So in the book, you talk about how you had met Nell. She was, I think, understudying on, was it Dreamgirls? Or was no, she had nothing. What all Nell had to do, she was in the original workshops of Dreamgirls. That's right.
And if you go on YouTube, you can hear her singing the song One Night Only very slowly, like a ballad. But what happened was she decided to take Ain't Misbehaving, which put her out of the running and then even further out of the running when she moved to California to do Give Me a Break.
But did some stuff. I think they did a number from Ain't Misbehaving at one of the Macy's parades one year, and she performed it.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
So she goes out to California, and you're like, I think you came up with the idea to make her a maid. Am I remembering that right?
Yes. Brandon, first of all, I made a talent deal with her because I knew we could always use her. Someone like that you can slot into. In fact, the first thing I slotted her into was a stupid trucker show at Universal. I don't know what it was, but she did it. So when I first wanted to make a talent deal with Gimme, and they said, well, what could she play? And I said, she can always be a maid. I mean, I said that. I don't mean that. And when Brandon gave me the okay, and I met with her, and I said, well, I have good news and I have bad news. By the way, we were both in her car doing a little bit of coke when this happened.
It was the 80s.
Hers, not mine. And who am I to say no if you're sitting next to her and she's driving?
Yeah, it's polite.
You're going to be a good guest.
Yeah.
So I said, look, here's the deal. They want you, but basically the character is a housekeeper, a maid. I don't know if you want to do that. And she gave me the old Hattie McDaniel line: "Is I'd rather be paid $2,000 a week on television or in the movies than $20 a week being a maid."
Right, to play a maid rather than be a maid.
Whatever it was, so that's how it was done. But my saying she could always be a maid, that's how Gimme a Break happened.
They're like, great, perfect. The pitch is, we greenlit it in the room.
And then Brandon said, yeah, a black hazel. Now that made sense because it took her out of being a servant. You never thought of Shirley Booth as being a servant in that?
No. Growing up watching that show, there were a number of shows that I always kind of looked at, and this was likely not intentional, but as sort of Trojan horse shows, right? So like Kate and Allie, I loved, and it's a show about a lesbian couple. Right? Like,
I never thought that, but go on.
But like, so Give Me a Break to me, because of the relationship between Dolph Sweet and Nell Carter, it's a husband and wife relationship in the show. Like, it's an interracial marriage show.
I tried to do that. I was doing everything to try to make the show better. And when that show was over, I wanted to do a show. I wanted to, have Nell married to a white man, and then a white man with kids and a black woman with kids, put them together, see what happens. Yeah. To me, that is not such a outlet, and I couldn't sell it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like the sort of conservativeness of television, especially in sitcoms, even through the 90s, was kind of old fashioned.
Well, yeah.
So, you have now, and then you open the book being like taking somewhere between credit and blame, I'll say, for David Hasselhoff. I think.
Well, I hope, and I wonder if Hasselhoff ever read that. I hope he did, because I hope, but all of that is, everything is exactly as it happened.
And my favorite part of that is the Baywatch section. And I've had a number of people from Baywatch on this show because that show just fascinates me. It's such a bizarre thing. But you're saying when they're pitching the show, they had made a list of people they wanted to star in what would be the Hasselhoff role. And it's like Peter O'Toole and all these people. And you're basically like, after all those people say no, give me a call and we'll call David Hasselhoff.
Basically, yes. Yeah, that's exactly. Because, again, the two misguided people who wrote the pilot really thought they were in the Hill Street League of, people can be very delusional.
It's lifeguards. Like at the end of the day, like, guys.
But the point is, it's still work. Knowing you have to know what you're dealing with. That's part of casting, is knowing. No, don't even think that, because it's not going to happen.
It's interesting because, again, opening my eyes up to what a casting director does, and this is someone who's I've done stand-up and been involved in this world forever, but even still, there's things I didn't realize till I read the book, and one of them is this interesting middle ground that you have to live in of having a creative vision or knowing what a person can do while also being very practical and realistic. So sort of being able to go, like you were saying earlier, like, no, they'll be great on the night, trust me. And also being like, that's not going to work, is a really weird sort of mixture of gut instincts to have.
Well, yeah. And I also was never shy. I mean, I was never afraid of saying something. I know a lot of casting directors who will choose not to engage or debate or whatever with the people they're working for. And I know, to me, it was just the opposite. You're paying me for one thing, my fucking opinion, so listen to it.
Right. I'm not like, you're not just bringing people in, you're actually recommending things and making comments on them. You're not saying, okay, you want 5 tall blonde guys, here they are. Like, that's not the sort of case.
Yeah, no, I knew, but getting back, I knew what I was going to tell you. I was forced out of CBS. Did I start to tell you that?
You did say that, yep.
It had to. It won't even make sense if I tell you why. But forced out nicely. I mean, basically because Ethel knew what I wanted to do went way beyond just casting. So she said, "I know that you want to do lots of things. This is not the best fit for you. So take your time, but you got to leave." 2 weeks later, I was head of talent for Spelling-Goldberg. Literally 2 weeks later, because a friend of mine, I was only friends with excellent casting directors. I'm a snob. If I thought, I was always polite to people, but Linda Otto, who's one of the best she's dead now, but we were very good friends. And she calls me literally a day after I'm not at CB, said, "Look, I can't stand this anymore. I want to stop casting. I'm going to marry Alan, who is the guy she'd been dating, who's a very rich guy. I'm going to produce documentaries. Do you want my job?"
Like, yeah, think about it. I don't know.
I said, yeah. So I went in to meet, Len Goldberg and Aaron Spelling. And the next week, I'm casting Starsky and Hutch, and learning all about that kind of television, because I had only worked on super premium television before, meaning I cast Playhouse 90s. I did the Bicentenial Minutes, which were that. I did the Newhart show, which is still, while it was not Mary Tyler Moore, it's a stepchild, but still up there. So I was only used to doing really quality things with great reviews, and now I'm working for schlock.
But you still, you were casting kind of the guest star roles a lot.
Well, no, but no. What happened was I learned, and I learned this once, and I learned it very, very soon with Aaron and Len. I learned how to do what I call bread and butter commercial television. CBS, except for Newhart, was not bread and butter television. That was very elite television. So, and I remember once and I had more authority than the producers and directors of the episodes, because there were 3 different producers, and of course they trusted, because I came recommended by Linda. They trusted me completely. Yeah. Linda was just extraordinary. So if the producer didn't want someone, but I did, I got my way. Right. Not that I got my way. I will tell you one thing at the end, because this is a great story, and I think I put it in the book. I love doing Starsky and Hutch. I had to learn. And the first thing I learned was, I didn't have to get anybody's approval. I worked it out with the show, and then I would send Aaron and Len, I'd send over to them headshots. Mm-hmm. That's it, just headshots. So after the first day's dailies, after one episode, I got a call from Len or Aaron, I forget which one, and he said, how could you let them hire that bad guy? We always had bad guy number 1 and bad guy number 2. Sure. It always worked that way. So he said, what do you mean? He said, well, he's smaller than Paul. He said, you can't have Paul and David fighting with people smaller than them.
Even if they're bad guys?
I said, but he has a gun. He said, it doesn't matter. The optics are you can't beat on... But when you think about that, that's a very smart thing.
It is.
And I didn't know it, but after that, I knew it.
But I've come around to Starsky and Hutch later in life and realized how funny that show is, and intentionally, and they're a comedy duo. Their timing is comedy, and then the second, not second tier, but the weak guest players. There's an episode with G.W. Bailey, John Saxon, and Suzanne Summers all in one episode.
Yes. Well, I think that was done by Linda. That was the year before me, but I did the same thing. And I didn't know David before, but I knew Paul from New York, because he was he was in a show across the street from where Hello Dolly was. So,
Yeah.
and everybody on 44th Street between Broadway and 8th knew each other, literally. So, but what happened is once the show began, both of them especially would call me to say thank you for these actors, because you saw people on there who you would never see before.
No.
And I'm in my own thing is I am not going to use any of these people who I have seen all the time on other crime shows on television. I am not going to do that.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
No, and you got so many great people like at the beginning of their career. And then speaking of which, like one of the other things you talk about, and I talk about this on the show all the time, is, until very recently, you were a TV actor or a movie actor. And if you switched between one or the other, it was because you were going up or coming down.
Going down.
That
Sure.
was it.
And Michael Fox changed it.
Yes. Yes. Doing 2 movies and a show all at once, and then that was fine.
Well, we made that happen. Why wouldn't you? I mean, they told us what was going on. We said, hey, if you guys can figure out how to do this, do it.
And it worked out better for everyone.
Of course it did. Of course it did.
And then you kind of moved into doing some reality TV shows, and that was interesting to me because you're having to look at people in a different way of not acting, but sort of how they are and how they'll be in a role, sort of, right?
I worked for Stone Stanley, and the one show that basically lasted that I was most proud of, because one of them has become a real star. A big female star was Pop Stars, Nicole Scherzinger. And come on, when she auditioned,
Oh, yeah.
Helen Keller would have picked her out. It's, but something's interesting? When I saw the show in New York that she's in, Sunset Boulevard, and then I went backstage afterwards to see her. And in my book, you see there's a picture of her. So I go backstage, and it's like, she didn't remember me. Well, it makes total sense, but I had to remind her. Well, and once I reminded her, it was different. I was complaining one day on Facebook. I was having a conversation on Facebook with someone she had worked for many personal managers, and she was very familiar with casting and all that. So I was complaining about how casting directors never get recognition, or rarely. Now it's a little more. And she said, well, casting directors are like fairy godmothers.
It's true.
Now, the fairy godmother may have done the work, but she wasn't invited to the ball.
That's true.
If you think about that, so we do all the work, but we just don't get credit.
It's your own personal satisfaction as a star maker. And the one thing I wanted to ask you too was, you mentioned in the book in the photo section about casting SNL, but I don't recall reading it in there. And that must have been the Gene Duranian, Dick Ebersol?
No, I had nothing to do with Gene Duranian. This was when first of all, I had nothing to do with SNL except this one time. And it was when Lorne had quit for whatever reason. And so I suggested Christine Ebersol, Broadway person. She can sing. She's good at comedy. And they hired her. But that's the only person I was ever able to get on SNL.
It was a good casting role. Like she would pop up in sitcoms later, and I always knew her from SNL. Like I think she was in Valerie in the first season, and she kind of was in a bunch of other shows later. But it was always like she never found a TV role that was like worthy of her talents.
No, not really. But hey, she's wealthy. She's married well, and all
doing
that.
just fine. Doing just fine.
You don't have to worry about her.
Is there anything you watch now? Are you able to watch stuff and enjoy them and not be like, I wouldn't have cast them, I would have done this differently, I would have done that?
Well, first of all, now when I watch things, I don't know who anybody is.
That's nice.
So I don't do that. I don't do that. Occasionally, I'll see someone who's dreadfully miscast, but that happens so rare.
I love the road not traveled that comes up in the book, and the Fantasy Island's the one that comes to mind the most, where it's like they want Orson Welles. Oh no, then we're gonna have James Mason, and I'm like, I'm trying to imagine those shows with those people, and it's very
well.
different.
If you can imagine, you can fit James Mason right into that without
easily.
Orson Welles would have been a stretch because he never would have made it through one episode.
No, he would have been directing everything.
Who knows? But do you know what I also did, which is not in the book? Do you know that at one point in my casting career, I had 4 hours of television a week? Yeah, in other words, that's an entire night plus 1 hour. I was Family. Remember Family?
Oh yeah, yep.
I was casting Family, Starsky and Hutch. I forgot what else, but there were 4 at that time.
Was it Love Boat and Fantasy Island? Was that the same
Love
time?
Boat and Fantasy Island, yeah. So you put them together, that's 4 hours. I mean, come on, that's 1/7 of NBC's shows.
And there's only 3 networks.
That's how important I was, in a sense, but was never really, well, I was never treated badly. I can't say that. But certainly, casting 4 hours of television deserves more money or something.
Oh yeah, that's no small accomplishment. And the fact that people would know Aaron Spelling's name, but, they wouldn't necessarily know who sort of brought all these stars to the light.
But that's okay.
You did all right.
I did fine.
Were you watching the shows you would cast? Would you watch them when they aired?
Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It all depended, because I'd go to dailies and I'd go to rough cuts. So I didn't really have to.
I feel like you have at least another book's worth of stories in you.
Oh, I'm starting to what do you call it? Jot down little notes for because I want to do another, like an updated one with more stuff in it.
Yeah, but again, I would just read one with your capsule reviews of television pilots for 200 pages.
That was my most fun, was doing that at the end.
Did you go back and rewatch them, or was it all from memory?
All from memory. The only thing I had to go back for was like the date,
right?
Or if I was unsure of the year. But I admitted there was one show, I forgot what it was, that this one was so bad I don't even remember it.
For your own sanity, your brain has completely jettisoned it from your mind.
Well, who knows? Anyway, but I had a great time. The best part of it was when I started working with Brendon Tartikoff.
Yeah.
And he, basically, think of this for balls. I had a boyfriend who was in a play in London. And NBC was making money hand over fist in the 80s. And so I just announced, I didn't ask. I said to Brendon, I'm going to go to London this weekend. I said, I heard about this actor and the show, and Lou was there, so I want to go anyway. And fine. But I didn't even have to ask. Yeah,
because he knew he needed you. He wasn't going to make you mad.
But I could do, and once in a meeting, without even thinking, you are a two-faced fuck. I said that because we had agreed with what we were going to say in this meeting coming up, and he completely reversed himself. And he didn't fire me after saying that.
But there are people in power who appreciate that. Like, I've known people who everyone's afraid of, and if you bust their balls or you're honest with them, they're like, "Oh yeah, I like you."
Well, I don't know how I don't know how to be anyway but the way I am. And it's probably prevented me from going higher in certain ways, but whatever it is, that's it,
You've done well with it.
People say, well, how is it for you coming out? I said, I don't know. I never came out.
Didn't have to.
I don't think I was ever in, so I didn't have to come out. I mean, it was, I was always me, for better or worse.
Was it strange to see television sort of embrace gay characters on TV after, working in an era when it was so unusual, where you had just a handful?
It didn't so much as seem strange, it just seemed terrific. It's about time.
Yeah.
Especially because half the writers and people created these.
Of course. Half the people on TV, like you mentioned the book too, you got, Paul Lynde, and people are like, well, no, he's definitely not gay.
What?
I've asked people Paul Lynde and Rip Taylor, and those people, and they're like, well, you never. They would be asked, they'd say no, and then you never thought of it again. And I'm like, really?
Somewhere I was looking at a documentary on Paul Lynde on, I don't know, somewhere online. I don't know which came to. It was sort of fascinating,
Oh yeah, he's a fascinating guy.
I once met him in it was a gay bar, and he was in it and I was in it, and I tried to talk to him. I wasn't interested in but I was, and it didn't work.
Yeah, I've heard he had a drinking problem, is what.
Well, he had a drinking problem, and he had a gay problem, and he was never comfortable with himself.
Yeah.
He couldn't be him. He couldn't be himself.
Man, but then Charles Nelson Riley, very comfortable.
Well, hey, it's also a little later.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's true. If you've seen Charles Nelson Riley's one-man show, The Life of Riley?
I did a while ago. It was played, I think he did it at the Little Theater on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Oh, it was so funny. I recommend that to everybody. It's, fascinating life.
I mean, did I tell you about, in the book, did I tell you what happened after Boy in the Plastic Bubble was a big hit and all of that?
Was that the first thing you got to be a producer on? Was it Boy in the Plastic Bubble?
Yeah, well, and if you discount the Bicentenial Minutes, yes.
Right.
I didn't get it. Cindy Dunn, and part of this is that Cindy Dunn, who actually happened, do you know who Elton Rule is or was? Well, Cindy Dunn was his daughter, actually. She was Nepo, but she was very good. So it's not how you get in, it's just how you deliver once you're there. So Cindy, it was a Friday, she comes into my office and she said, ABC just rejected my favorite script that I've been working on, blah, blah, blah. She said, the only way they would do it is if we can get if there was a big enough star. And she said, could you do me a favor and read this? It was a Friday night. And I said, Cindy, it's not a favor. That's my job. Yeah. Of course I'll read it. And she laughed and all that. And I had a ritual with a guy named Bob Lamond. And this is in the book, if you remember it. Stop me. But Lamond had a great group of clients: John Travolta, Jeff Conaway, Patrick Swayze, Catherine Hellman, Holland Taylor. Go on and on. And he was a good friend of mine. He'd come over to my house because he lived down in a little apartment, and I had a little house in Laurel Canyon with a deck. So I say on Saturday, our ritual was to get melanoma while reading our scripts for the week.
Yes, how very LA.
Scripts, I had this scripts. And he was complaining because this was like, now we're in June, I think, whatever it is, or in May, whatever. It's getting close to, the end of the season. And his biggest client at that time was Travolta. And Travolta said, I got to do something on this hiatus to show them that I'm not Vinnie Barbarino.
Right.
And literally, fate, I just finished reading the script, The Boy in the... I said, here, you want to change his image? This is it. But that's how that happens.
Happen.
That's how that happens.
Your timing is impeccable. I will say that for all these things.
Many times it's impeccable.
Yes.
So Travolta read it. Bob took it on a Saturday morning. Saturday night he read it, sent it over to Travolta, who basically has trouble reading. I forgot what it's called. But Sunday night he said he wanted to do it. So I walked into Cindy's office on Monday. And I said, well, do you think John Travolta is a big enough name for ABC? And remember now, he was huge on Welcome Back,
Massive,
Kotter.
biggest star on that
first
show.
Year.
Yeah.
And she said, what? I said, yeah. He wants to do it. She said, really? I said, yeah, he wants to do it. And then every person we called up from that, called Len and Aaron said, you're kidding, he wants to do this? But then it was like when they called ABC, because Travolta wanted to do it, but we were offering $25,000 and he wanted $75,000.
Little different.
But these days it's nothing still.
Oh yeah.
And so when the call went business went to business, and they said, look, we want John Travolta, but he's going to cost. And they didn't believe we had Travolta. And they said, no, you don't have to. We've offered him everything, and he's thrown everything at him. He doesn't want to do anything, so he's not going to do this. I mean, he is going to do this. It's like no one believed.
It is great when you have something so big, people are like, surely that's a lie.
And he loved it. He had a wonderful time doing it. We're still friends to this day, by the way. We do non-sexual midnight texting. The man doesn't sleep. He's like a vampire.
Well, that's good if he flies planes. That's what you want.
No, but again, you have remember, I've known him since he was 17.
Yeah, and you worked on Grease and worked on all these things. Yeah,
and I was on the set of Grease every single day, which you may not know, because Randall Kleiser, who directed Boy in the Plastic Bubble, and whose USC master's thesis I cast for him because it's such a well-written piece. So I was, in fact, a de facto Alan. There are so many things going through my mind now. One of them is that the best thing that happened to Grease was that Alan Carr, who created the project, who had the genius mind to see Grease and expand it. He did a great job with that. But the best thing that happened was he went in the hospital with a infected tummy tuck. And he couldn't be on the he could not be on the set to interfere and change anything. He had the genius to see it as a movie, but then anything that Alan was ever in charge of completely has been a failure. Everything, Where the Boys Are, 84. I wouldn't exactly call, what was the Village People movie, a huge success?
Oh, I Can't Stop the Music.
So everything,
it brought us Steve Guttenberg.
So everything he's done by himself without the other thing that he did, but again, on Broadway, the producer is in charge. It's the director and the writers. So the one show, what's the Gage, the La Cage aux Folles, whatever.
Oh, yeah. The Birdcage.
Yeah, Birdcage. So Alan was a producer of that on Broadway. But again, it was like other people, Mike Nichols could, overrule and stuff like that. Anyway, that's Alan's story. And we became friendly afterwards, but at that time, no. Oh, and also, he was pissed at me, and I think I even wrote in the book, I was supposed to get associate producer credit, which he never gave me. I mean, I was literally on the set every day because Randall Kleiser asked that I be on the set every day. Randall knew nothing about musicals. Nothing. He even thought, should we cut this number, which was Stockard Channing's number, the worst. I said, no. That can't be cut. That's the whole character.
But one of your few on-camera acting roles is in a musical where all the music was cut.
Yes, I know. But I'd love to see it with the music, but it only played once and then he threw it out.
Oh, I've seen it with the music.
You did?
You can find the cut. Yes.
Can you get that to me? I would love to.
I'll get it to you. Yeah, I'll get it to you. It's interesting.
Well, no, it's and I'm in it at the end. I'm in that movie.
Yeah.
At the end, it's Rosie O'Donnell, myself, and somebody else dancing with each other. It's like, what the fuck are we doing it here?
It's fun though. Yeah, no, I can get you a copy of that.
I'd love to see it again. And I wasn't bad, It's like
No.
The only problem was when I got called in for looping, I can't loop.
But that's a very specific skill that's really difficult.
And because for some reason, Jim Brooks wanted to change my name. My character name was Martin, and he wanted to change it to something else. And I just couldn't do it. So
it's hard.
Anyway, that was that. My definition of Hollywood was, I think if I'd stop me when you remember this, but this is after ABC sees the rough cut of Boy in the Plastic Bubble, and everything is wonderful. And Cindy and I, who were signed on, and the one thing we asked for at the beginning was, okay, we're not getting any more money, but we want credit as producers.
Sure.
And we got a definite maybe. So what happened was, and I remember this distinctly because I'm sitting at home. I shouldn't say sitting at home. I'm very handy with my hands, and I build things. I re-shingled my entire house, for instance, by myself.
That's no small thing.
No, and I sent myself through college by building sets and getting paid for it at Hunter College, because it was an all-girls school with 8,000 boys, 46 girls, and me. No, 8,000 girls, 46 boys, and me was the joke. But girls at that point didn't build sets, It was not right. Now, of course, everything is different. So I got paid for that. I'm in the bathtub with a very long phone call, a glass of wine, and a joint. So I picked up the phone. Hello, and it's Aaron Spelling's secretary. Hi, Joel. Can you hold for Aaron? Sure. I'm trying to sober up you have to get this image, and. Yeah. Aaron's, the gist of the conversation was, I just wanted to let you know that you and Cindy are going to get producer credit. I had to fight Len, but you're going to get it. And then on Monday morning, essentially the same thing, I get called into Len's office, and he tells me the same thing, but I really had to fight Len. I really had to fight Aaron to get you the credit.
He really didn't want it, was it? Yeah.
What do you make of that?
That's Hollywood in a nutshell.
That's Hollywood in a nutshell. But we did get the credit. And I'm looking at it right now. I have a very small ego wall, but I'm looking at it. Okay.
It's good to have that, though. It's important to pat yourself on the back for some pretty impressive stuff.
Well, yeah, no. When I look at what I've done, it's like what is left to do. It's like
Yeah, we didn't even mention Cheers and like all the other there's so many other things in stories.
Well, Cheers. My only contribution was Ted and Shay.
Oh, that's it.
Well, it's a lot. It came in,
Yeah.
And the guy. But you don't. I've known Jimmy Burrows since the '60s. He in New York, he was Abe Burrows' son, and he did a lot of stage managing at David Merrick shows that his father did. So here, obviously, he's Abe Burrows is his father. He was the one who went on to make $500 million.
Right.
He could buy the building that we grew up in on Central Park West. When Jimmy and the Charles brothers got the go-ahead for Cheers, from Brandon's office, they went directly to my office. We got the go-ahead. What do you think? We want you to cast it, meaning me. I said, I'd love to, but I can't. I said, it would happen is just legally, if I show favoritism to one of our NBC projects, another producer can complain, well, if they can have him, why can't, I said, but I'm going to give you the best person I have on staff, and I will also be available 24/7 when you need me. So that's good. But I only have 2 suggestions for you. You're going to see everybody in the world because it's such a high-profile project. You're going to wind up with Ted Danson and Shelley Long.
Yeah.
That's what I said. You're going to wind. I didn't say I think you're guys, but you're going to wind up with Ted. And they looked at me. And as how Ted finally got in with my crude mouth.
No.
This is the best story, and Ted didn't know this till 2 years ago. And when he found this out, he said, "You really said that?" I said, "Yes, I did." All right, so we had auditions, and it boiled down to William Devane, wonderful actor, who is exactly what they wrote in the script, an over-the-hill ball player.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, I've known him since my casting in New York, so it's not that, and I know he's a wonderful actor. And Ted, it came down to the 2. And Ted, they both gave wonderful readings and wonderful auditions. And then, by the way, all these decisions were made without a single woman.
Yeah.
Men discussing the sexiness of men with not one woman in the room. And worse, it was straight guys saying that. At least I have some knowledge of that. No, so literally and Grant Tinker had just come on board. He had left television for a while to be the head of GAN or whatever. He'd just come back and was now the chairman of NBC. So he is in this meeting too. And so it came down to the 2 of them, and they kept going back and forth and back and forth. And finally, I cut through it. I said, "Look," I said, we can go around and around this forever, but simply more women in America are going to want to fuck Ted Danson than Bill Devane. and I saw Grant going, like clutching his pearls. But that's what I said. And the next time they went,
you're not wrong.
And the next time they went around the room, it was decided in Ted's favor.
But that's like the story you tell with Hasselhoff to sort of bring it full circle is I think it's Tartikoff says, "Oh, I saw him in an airport, and the way that everybody was looking at him, right. We got to put him in a show."
That's right. No, and he was right. No, and I knew that too, So, but when you ever mention Hasselhoff's name, it's always got a joke, But he was very generous to me when I was doing my charity bike riding. He gave me $10,000.
By all accounts, I've heard nothing bad about him with all the people that have worked with him that I've talked to over the years. So
now you read my book. Do you think he would object to my first chapter, or he'd have a sense of humor about it?
I don't think so. I like. Having never met the man, but having read his book and having talked to a lot of people that work with him, I think he would find it funny.
Okay, good.
He seems to have a good sense of humor about himself, and it's very complimentary. It's framed in a comedic way, but it's ultimately very complimentary.
But do you remember how he got started?
He was in a soap, right?
Yeah, but do you know how he got on the soap?
I don't remember that part now.
I'll tell you that because it's if you put my name and where we've intersected over the years, I had a good friend who was head of daytime at NBC. And the newest show, not at CBS at that time, was Young and the Restless, was the latest soap to be done. And I had nothing to do with it, at all. Because I refused to have anything to do with soaps. Because I didn't watch them. I didn't know them. So I had.
Yeah, it's a different acting style. It's like a whole different
And so
thing.
there was one guy named Paul who I hired on my staff. He had the last desk of the room. I left him completely alone. He knew what he was doing. I didn't. So Hasselhoff's manager, a woman, again, who I describe, built like a refrigerator. She's a big bull dyke.
Yes.
And there's a picture of her in the book.
Exactly. I recall this now. Yes.
So, and I was told it was okay to use the word calling her a bull dyke if I referred to myself as a fag on the same page.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
So I did.
Yep. Equal opportunity.
No, I called a lesbian friend of mine. Do you know who Leah Delaria is?
No.
Short. Look her up after.
Okay.
You ever watch Orange is the New Black?
Oh, yes.
Big Boo.
Yeah.
She looks like Danny DeVito in a way with a mohawk.
Yes.
We're great friends. She's the gay brother I never had. The only lesbian I know who likes to trick. When it came to Baywatch, Knight Rider was no problem. When it came to Baywatch, he didn't want to do it. No, he really didn't want to do it. I mean, I couldn't understand why he didn't want to do it. But anyway, and I forgot my story, so I'm not going to do it. But eventually, he came in to meet with Grant Tinker, and whatever deal they made, which is fine.
Yes. Yeah. I think you said it's between them and their accountants. Yes. Oh man. Well, thank you so much. And again, I'll be the first in line to buy the next book as well. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, look, thank you. I always have a good time doing these because they're fun. And who doesn't? Well, some people don't like talking about myself. I've never had that problem.
It's hard.
Well, no, especially if I'm talking about things that I'm secure talking about, things that I know about. I'm really bad at bullshitting things that I don't know about. So.
There you go. That's Joel. As I said, amazing stories by Sex, Drugs, and Pilot Seasons, Confessions of a Casting Director. I put a link to the Amazon buy it link in the show description here, so you can just go down there and get it. You will love it. It is amazing. It's a great read. And I genuinely am looking forward to the next volume, as I know he has at least another book's worth of stories in him. Anyway, thank you for everyone who's already said happy birthday. It's not yet. What is today? Monday. It's on the 28th. It's Saturday. And former guests of the show, Meredith Goldstein and Daniela, who have the same birthday as me, same year and everything. Happy birthday to them. I did get already one gift. I got a Fred Hembeck, who I would love to have on the show if you're a comic book nerd. Fred did a little sketch card of Captain Video, the old 1940s or 1950s TV guy, Captain Video. It's very cool. And thanks, Fred, for that for my birthday. But anyway, next week won't be my birthday, so I'll shut up about it. It'll be America's birthday, everybody. I don't know why I said that like I was Mr. Ed. Anyway, go to the Patreon, email me, do all the things, and I'll be here next week, and I hope you will too, for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
We were both in her car doing a little bit of coke when this happened. Hers, not mine. And who am I to say no if you're sitting next to it and she's driving?